Hello, YouTube. I just wanted to give some thoughts on this idea of free speech and the internet. Um, uh, what free speech means in relation to the internet. Um, and I mean, first thing I want to do is I want to suggest that uh, the I want to suggest that the piece of language free speech might be the wrong way to conceive of the issue. So I'd prefer to just use the term internet speech, right? Um, Free speech. The difficulty with advocating free speech in the context of the internet, of course, is that um, people point out, well, this is my channel. I'm not infringing on your right to free speech, right? The legalistic definition of free speech, um, and the conversation can just be derailed um, by pointing out that legally speaking, uh, you know, banning people on the internet does not infringe upon somebody's free speech. Um, so I'd like to use the term internet speech um, just for the moment. Um, what it seems to me that the the issue of free speech on the internet, or internet speech, is extremely important, and it seems that there are people who are discussing this at this moment who aren't taking into account a simple or a dimension of context, right? And the internet is a number of things, but one of the things that it is a battleground at the moment um, between people who conceive of the internet as something that ought to be a a centralized one-way medium, like television is, for instance. You can think of SOPA and PIPA advocates and ACTA and all that. And then on the other side, people like the designers of Tor and what are called cypherpunks and hackers and etc. Um, who want a radically decentralized uh, internet, right? Um, and I have to say that I tend towards the latter. I'm not a hacker or anything, but philosophically speaking, I tend towards the latter. I think that there's um, there's something extremely important in the ability to distribute information and to communicate information in a highly decentralized way. Um, I think that that has political importance in the long run. Um, I think that it's important that information has a platform wherein which it can proliferate itself, such that it doesn't have to uh, abide by some kind of centralized power structure, right? So that's a very uh, that's a very rough sketch of the context within which this is placed. Um, but there's something really important in that when you're talking about internet speech, right? Um, so the relationship of the moderator to the user, right, is an asymmetrical relationship. The moderator has the capacity to block people. The moderator has the capacity to delete people's information. It has the capacity to do all sorts of things. It again stands in an asymmetrical relationship to the user, and it seems to me that a person who is an advocate for a free and open internet has a very different relationship to the block button on YouTube or Twitter or or forums or whatever. Um, they have a very different relationship to that block button than the person who is not an advocate for a a free and open internet. Um, and I don't want to suggest that someone like P.Z. Myers, for instance, is not an advocate of a free and open internet. He might be sort of in principle, and he might not be steeped in the culture of the internet in the way that others might be. Um, but the fact is, like when I create a YouTube channel, for instance, I'm given a certain amount of tools at my disposal. I'm given the ability to block people. I'm given the ability to report people. You can issue copyright claims on people. You can flag people. You can do all sorts of stuff with a YouTube comment, right? Now the fact is, when you look at that toolkit, um, you're immediately presented with the question of what kind of space online do you want to create? Do you want to create a centralized, one-way platform, right? Do you want your space to be a television channel, essentially? Or do you want to create a platform that is a condition for the possibility of free discussion, right, amongst people? Um, and you have that choice in front of you, and it seems to me to be, uh, to pick the former seems to me to be what I I would almost say a micro-authoritarian gesture, right? Um, I don't want to say authoritarian because that has sort of political implications. I think a lot of this rhetoric, like you're trying to silence people or something like that. Like I feel like a lot of that rhetoric carries with it political implications that are perhaps hyperbolic and sort of obscure the issue. But I think that there is something what I would call micro-authoritarian in the gesture of not allowing comments, in not allowing ratings, and not allowing whatever. Um, and this is, what I think personally, this is deeply problematic. Um, it seems that particularly, in the case of P.Z. Myers, for somebody who runs a website called Free Thought Blogs, right? It seems that if your interest is in free thought and advocating free thought and propagating free thought, then you should be conceiving of every public internet space that you create as an opportunity to foster discourse and discussion. Um, without that, then without that, your claim is subverted. You've delegitimized um, a certain aspect of the advocacy of free thought. Um, and not only that, like within the larger context of the struggle for a centralized versus decentralized internet, um, you you are creating, in the sense that we're all creating the internet when we make new channels or make new videos or make new anything. Like you're creating an internet that is organized around centralized uh, tent poles, centralized one-way um, uh, gestures, right? And again, micro-authoritarian gestures. Um, so for me, personally, and like, this is what I want to get to, like, yes, like, absolutely, that's your YouTube channel. You can do whatever you want on your YouTube channel. I have no objection to that. But for me personally, um, when I start seeing, you know, uh, no comments are allowed on this video or stuff like that, um, that evokes, in my mind, the larger struggle for the internet, and that invokes in my mind the uh, the notion that you're kind of an enemy in the larger struggle. And I don't want to say that. I don't want to create an us and them mentality. The fact is, like, people probably just don't think of it in this light. People probably just don't think of the internet in the light of the larger struggle for the internet. People have a very narcissistic conception of the internet with the advent of social media. This is my space. This is my property. This is my domain, and this is where I have authority. I have the authority to block people. I have the authority to do these things, and I will exercise this liberally. And there is there's a direct correlation, I think, between being ban happy, how ban happy you are, and how much I don't want to support you. Uh, and it's not simply out of I don't think I've ever been banned from an internet forum. I may have been, I don't know. I'm not somebody who runs around trolling people. But like the authority to ban people is in itself how you exercise that authority is an issue, right? And like, do I want to contribute to the size of the platform of somebody who enforces extremely strict moderation practices? For instance, if you were to say, if you were to talk about, and I just as an example, if you say, okay, harassment is not allowed in my internet space. All right, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say, sort of. But the problem becomes, how do you define harassment then, right? What form of critique against me? Where's the line between harassment and like satire? Where's the line between harassment and trolling? Do I want to, on the basis of people who are trolling, on the basis of people who are trolling, do I want to, create a closed community with really strict guidelines and really strict rules? I don't think that I would do that. I feel like, as somebody who has a certain relationship to the internet, like, in allowing for an open space, which is what I'd like to do with a YouTube channel, or what I would like to do with anything else that I do on the internet. I don't think I've ever banned anybody, even spammers. Like, in doing that, in trying to foster that environment, like, you're gonna get trolls, and you're gonna get spammers, and you're gonna get, people who are harassing. And I think that anticipating that and being aware of that, well, then you end up with the question of, do you just want to ban these people? Do you just want to... I don't think so. I don't want to practice banning people. And the reason why I don't want to practice banning people is because I don't want to get in the habit of banning people. Because I don't want to, I don't like spammers, I don't like trolls. Well, okay, so I could ban them. But then, like, getting into that habit, I feel like there's a danger of a slippery slope of, I don't then like what you're saying, even though it might be a legitimate argument. Or it might be, maybe you're satirizing something and it comes off offensive. Do I ban that person? I don't think so. I think that that is reprehensible to do. It would be like, well, I don't want to put it in the issue of free speech, but it would be something like, if you remember the White House Correspondents' Dinner where Colbert gave his speech and George Bush was right there, and he gave this really, really biting satirical speech. It would be like, Bush saying, well, you're not allowed to have a TV show anymore. And like that's different, and I understand that's different because that would be the government acting, and then therefore it applies to the legal category of freedom of speech. But what's important is that like you have to allow people to satirize, you have to allow people to make fun of, you have to allow people to say things that are offensive to you. That's just a part of what comes along with having an open space. And if you can't take that, if you can't stomach that, if your skin isn't thick enough to like to deal with a couple of assholes, then like fuck you.